Space has been called many things: the final frontier, the heavens, the void. But as technology advances, space is becoming part of our everyday lives. Now it aids in communication and entertainment, with satellites floating in the expanse and transmitting billions of signals every day. However, this involvement might soon progress to mining on the moon or weapons testing on asteroids. As the human race becomes more and more involved in space, laws to govern it are becoming necessary. The United Nations has already agreed that outer space is a common space, not to be claimed in the name of any single country. This leaves outer space in an undeniably similar situation to that of an area here on Earth, international waters. So, what can we learn from the sea? Can our knowledge of maritime law help us regulate this new common space?
Atmospheric.
One of the great driving forces for mankind, profit, is making both the deep sea floor and the surface of the moon look very attractive to mining companies and their investors. The floor of the ocean contains massive sulfur deposits which have high concentrations of metals like magnesium and gold. Similarly, the moon's surface has high concentrations of tritium, an isotope of helium that could soon be used to power nuclear power generators more cleanly than any element commonly found on Earth. With the huge potential for profit and the seemingly easy accessibility of the sea floor, it's surprising that as of 2011, there are no active mining sites in international waters. In fact, the two companies that are closest to being operational are operating within the exclusive economic zones of countries. So, although there are regulations in place for mining in international waters, these regulations may not be the best example to look at when regulations for mining extraterrestrially are necessary.
It's often thought that the law that governs Antarctica will be the law that serves as the framework for the development of the moon. I've always thought it would be much more like the seabed, because we don't mine Antarctica, we mine the seabed. And when you mine the seabed, you acquire a proprietary right that has the quality of Antarctica. And that's this kind of first come, first serve.
It does regulate the issue by solving one of the most basic issues: ownership, defining who owns what and who has the right to do anything from mine to settle to conduct experiments. It's a universal issue. This issue is particularly important when addressing the possibility of arms testing in space. In order to understand the possibilities of future nuclear arms testing in space, the best place to look for guidance is the regulation dealing with one of the most well-known instances of nuclear arms testing in a common space.
Let's eat! Oops!
Bikini Bottom, the setting for the popular children's show SpongeBob SquarePants, is a reminder of the radiation pollution left behind by nuclear testing in the Bikini Atoll and the rest of the Marshall Islands. The first hydrogen bomb test in the Marshall Islands occurred in 1946 on the Bikini Atoll. Because the Marshall Islands were placed under United States trusteeship by the United Nations, the U.S. was able to control 98 islands and over 3 million square miles of ocean. They also had the power to relocate populations and close large portions of the territory to create warning areas, including areas that are today considered international waters. These warning areas are in direct conflict with the right to freely navigate the high seas. The United States used the ambiguity of trusteeship treaty to its advantage, circumventing several conditions of the treaty. Article 73, which stated that the interests of the inhabitants were paramount. Article 6, stating that the United States must work toward economic progress and sustainability in the area, while protecting the health of the inhabitants, as well as other conditions.
To take on
So how is the United States able to sidestep even the clearest of conditions included in the UN treaty? Because nuclear weapons were far too technologically advanced to be effectively anticipated when the laws were written. Similarly, outer space law seems to avoid the issue of use and testing of nuclear weapons. The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty prohibits the use of nuclear weapons in outer space, but it also seems to indicate that portions of outer space can be considered to be under a particular state's control, possibly giving the state the freedom to test nuclear weapons in those areas. Therefore, Can we expect the future of thermonuclear testing in outer space to repeat the patterns of the sea?
So I think that as far as weapons in space are concerned, that practical realities will move beyond the law rather quickly in areas such as missile defense or also in areas such as asteroid intercept.
Whether or not the ambiguity included in the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty will be taken advantage of to engender a case of international déjà vu to 1946 is yet to be seen. Nevertheless, the history of maritime law continues to provide insight into future governance in outer space, a history that can be traced as far back as the beginnings of piracy. The most familiar image that occurs when most people hear the word pirate are those of Captain Jack Sparrow and his crew cruising through the Caribbean, wreaking havoc on relatively recently developed British settlements. Surprisingly, since most pop culture references are less than reputable, this isn't too far from the truth. In the 17th and
World's
18th
busiest shipping
centuries,
lanes.
the newly
In the
colonized
space of a few
Caribbean was
minutes,
a prime
they get-
location for piracy. The conditions were perfect. There were lax or non-existent maritime
A few days
laws,
earlier,
and
the
constant
Absalom
disputes
came to
over
the aid
ownership
of the
land.
Faze Ozami.
The sheer plethora
After several days of
issues which
captivity,
surround
the
colonization,
14 members of the Dow's
establishing
crew
a
were
governmental
freed,
system,
safe and sound.
subduing the natives,
Once again,
communication
the pirates.
problems meant the pirates rarely saw repercussions
Now
for their
you've got the
robberies and
components
kidnappings
for what
until
would
the
be
above
piracy,
problems were
that is
settled around the
nefarious
year
acts, the ability
1726.
to intercept.
This is not to insinuate that piracy disappeared after its heyday in the
and the
Caribbean.
possibility that you get somebody
Particularly in
who's
areas
kind of
surrounding
after their own
Indonesia
interest
or near
and not
Somalia,
after the interests of
piracy
other
is a
participants.
dangerous and rising trend. In 2010, there were more than 50 piracy attempts just in the Gulf of Aden. Nowadays, the methods are different. Small bands of well-armed men and motorboats prey on larger, slower cargo ships and rob the inhabitants and then hold the ship and crew for ransom. But the reasons piracy is thriving are largely the same. Somalia's lack of governmental intervention, some abetting nations, and communication inconsistencies mean that this area of the world, like the 16th century Caribbean, is a prime location to get away with high-sea robbery and kidnapping.
I think the key is space commercialization. You've got the components for what would be piracy, that is nefarious acts, the ability to intercept and destroy other persons' assets in space, and the possibility that you get somebody in space who's kind of looking after their own interest and not after the interests of other participants.
Although current space exploration is limited by technological resources and a lack of a fiscal profit, these show sign of changing as we speak. As private companies like Galactic Suites Limited begin sending individuals into space, the possibility for piracy will increase in proportion to our presence there. While governments are busy discussing who owns that asteroid or whose spaceship hotel can park there for a week, or what square foot of outer space their jurisdiction begins or ends in, villainous individuals will have more opportunity than they have had since the golden age of piracy for widespread destruction and mayhem. The final frontier presents us with a multitude of possibilities, limited only by ever-progressing technology. But as we find that these advancements need to be regulated, perhaps the best place to look for guidance is the place where humans have been for centuries, the sea.